Wake that ass up.
Early in the morning.
The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ Envy, Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are the Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building today.
Yes, indeed.
Dr. Carl Hart, Columbia University professor. Welcome, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Good morning, sir. Tell them a little bit more about yourself.
I'm a professor at Columbia. I also work at the New York State Psychiatric Institute, where I'm a research scientist. I've been doing that for about 25 years. Before that, I was at Yale, and before that, I was at the University of California, San Francisco.
Now, we talked about you earlier this week because you were all over the news.
You got a book out.
And you were talking that you are an admitted heroin user.
Well, get to the book first. The book.
Just say what's all over the news. That's what I'm asking.
And I saw you on that crack
documentary.
Also.
Yeah.
I saw him on that crack. Like, Jesus Christ.
Goodness gracious.
The documentary, it's great. You should watch it if you guys haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, he was just telling me about it.
But the book is called Drug Use for Grown-Ups, Chasing Liberty in the Land of Fear. Explain that title.
Yeah, the title, the real action is in the subtitle, Chasing Liberty in the Land of Fear. I use drugs as a topic to explore our own liberty. I'm a drug expert, so I use drugs. And I was trying to point out to people that the Declaration of Independence, for example, guarantees all of us 3 birthrights: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Correct. As
long as you don't mess with anybody else's ability to do the same. Now, what that means is that you can live your life however you choose. And I was using drugs as a topic. It's like, why should people care what you put in your body as long as you are a good person? You don't mess with people. And so in exploring this topic this past week, I realized that, I already knew, but I'm an example of how moralistic we are, regardless of what kind of person you are. People will attack you if you engage in certain behaviors that have been deemed evil for whatever reason. Well, there was a time when homosexuality was the case. There was a time when black people were being attacked for just being black. Now, drugs, crack, or heroin is the evil thing to engage in.
Because those things hurt people, including the person using them. You know what I mean?
Yeah, great question. So
I didn't ask a question, but I made a statement.
Yeah.
Well, I was trying to save you, right? Because on the one hand, you should know that heroin is a medication that is approved for treatment. Heroin and morphine are essentially the same drug. The Bayer Aspirin Company, for example, in 1874, just attached 2 acetyl groups to morphine to make heroin. But the bottom line is that they're the same drug because the acetyl groups don't have any biological effects.
Didn't Bayer used to be called heroin?
No.
Or something like that?
No.
I saw something about that.
No. But the point is that heroin is a perfectly good pain reliever. It also induces euphoria and a wide range of effects that we desire, like pleasure. So when you say that it doesn't harm you, certainly it can harm you. If people overdo it and they don't know what they're doing, they certainly can be harmed. Just like when you drive a car.
But is it addictive, though? Is heroin addictive?
Is heroin addictive? Certainly can be addictive. You drink alcohol?
Not really.
Well, people drink alcohol. Alcohol is addictive. Sugar, all of these sorts of things can be addictive. In my book, I'm trying to help people to understand what makes things addictive, not the substance itself, because as much as 75% of the people who use heroin are not addicted. They don't have any problem.
What you said? What percentage? I'm sorry.
As much as 75%. So when you see this, you say, all right, if most of the people who use that drug, or any other drug for that matter, are not addicted, then you have to look beyond the drug itself. And in this book, I'm trying to tell people what those factors are that increases someone's likelihood of becoming addicted.
I'm fascinated by this conversation. What are your drugs of choice?
What are my drugs of choice?
Yeah.
So like that kind of question, for example, it's like saying, what's your favorite sexual position? It's a private thing, right? I mean, that's a private thing.
Well, no, you put it in the book. You said you do heroin. You said you do heroin.
No, hold on. I put a lot of things in the book. I said that I have done heroin. For example, like in the past week, the media, I think it's been said, I do heroin every day, I inject and so forth.
That's what they made it seem like. That's
all that is just untrue. You know, we're in a pandemic. how can I get heroin in this pandemic? At least I can't. And any heroin I ever used was pharmaceutically grade heroin. I don't do drugs that are bought off the street. That's stupid. I published this year
where do
alone.
they sell heroin if
Yeah,
it's
where
not
do you
in
get your heroin?
Patterson, Brooklyn, or the Bronx?
Well, United States ain't the only country, I travel a lot. In this book, I travel to 5 different continents, and heroin is available on pharmaceutical grade in many of these countries in which I travel to. So they have this idea of someone who uses heroin as some poor soul who is injecting the drug and is a slave to the drug. And they think that heroin is the reason for that person's problem, because that person definitely exists. But the person's problem is not so much heroin as everything else. Like the person might have co-occurring psychiatric illnesses. The person might have had some traumatic stuff that's happened to their life. They may have recently lost some well-paying middle-class job, and they now have no status in their community. Like what has happened in the Rust Belt of America. Like GM left and went to other countries, and other factories left and went to other countries. Now those people are without gainful middle-class employment.
Dr. Hart, can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
I always hear people say, well, I'm chasing that high I got the first time that I use it. But is that a real thing? Because I've heard so many people say that on documentaries.
Yeah, I know, because we are willing to accept that, right? No, it's certainly true. Like, just think of the first time you enjoyed an orgasm. It's like, it was amazing. For me, the first time, it's like, am I chasing the first time I had an orgasm? No,
Yeah.
Of course not. But although I do.
like that feeling.
I like that
but
feeling.
But orgasm can't kill me, can it?
What orgasm can't kill you? You certainly can
Yeah,
get
it
killed.
can.
I mean, you
People have had
think
heart
about
attacks.
sexually translated diseases and so forth. But it's a silly sort of thing where people say, I was chasing that high for the one I had the first time. It's like saying I was chasing the first orgasm I had. I mean, none of us are sitting here saying that, oh yeah, I'm trying to get that first orgasm again. That's the equivalent. It's silly. So again, the title of the book is Drug Use for Grown-Ups. I'm trying to have a grown-up conversation about drugs,
But that's why we're asking, because we don't know. Like, for instance, would you consider yourself addicted to heroin, or when is the last time you used heroin?
More than a year ago. I don't know.
Oh, so, okay.
But this is the thing.
Because the press makes it seem like you use it every morning, like you pop
For the past
up.
5 years.
You click open the fireplace and.
But that's why we have you here to explain this thing. I want you to know we're not judging you
not
in any
attacking
way.
you or
We're bringing you
judging, we're
here
asking.
to have the conversation.
Trust me, I appreciate it, and I know it. And mad love to all of you all. But I need people to understand, it's the New York fucking Post. I mean, when has the New York Post been favorable to black people? When? Come on. I mean, people are... This book, I'm trying to liberate black people.
What is the message you're trying to get across in Drug Use for Grown-Ups? Let's start there. What's the message coming from Dr. Hart?
All right. So you all know ASAP Yams, right?
Yes.
You all know Steven Rodriguez is his name, and you know he died from what was termed a drug overdose, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
When that brother died, his mom contacted me. And she gave me his toxicology report and showed me what was in the system. And it appears that he may have died from a combination of opioids and other sedatives. Mm-hmm. Now, for years, I have been writing that if you're going to use opioids, and particularly if you're a novice, don't combine it with other sedatives like alcohol, like older antihistamine, like people like promethazine. Don't combine your opioids with those drugs because it increases the likelihood of respiratory depression. So I made a promise to her that I would do everything I could to educate the public about this, to help avoid having other mothers having to experience what she experienced. And that's one of the main messages from the book. And this is the message that the fucking New York Post does not say. And that's why it upsets me so much when I have nothing but love and compassion and people are attacking me.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I'm watching your body language and I see you shaking. I'm like, okay, is he going through a withdrawal or is he upset about
Give me
something?
a break, man.
I'm being honest.
Come on, man. I mean,
You're upset, clearly.
Yeah, it's like, first of all, I have too much respect for you. Too much respect for you and too much respect for you not to come here and be correct. I am upset about what has been said about me because, I have children, I have a family, I have all of these sorts of things.
Would you want your children to indulge in drug use? Because, growing up, I see you from Miami, you from a poverty-stricken area, you've sold drugs, you used drugs as a kid, you engaged in petty crimes. But one thing growing up, the first thing your parents say is don't use drugs. Drugs, especially this drug, don't use cigarettes. It's a gateway to stronger drugs. Would you advise your kids to use drugs or tell your kids about using drugs?
It's like saying, would you advise your kids to have sex, right?
Why is sex always the correlation?
Because everybody, I hope, has had sex.
But if my kids are getting married,
I'll tell you.
But if my kids are getting married, you want them to have sex, right?
And sex is pleasurable, right? And people want that sort of pleasure.
Correct.
So when you say, would you advise your kids to engage in drugs? And I wouldn't advise them, but that's not my concern, whether they do it or not. My concern is keeping them safe. So my kids...
Telling them wear a condom.
Exactly.
Don't buy it off the street.
Exactly, bro.
Don't buy it off the street.
Exactly. Because the most dangerous thing about drugs to most people who are black and brown is not the drugs, it's the police. And so that's why I would really tell people, don't...
But also, you don't know what's in it sometimes, too.
But I tell my kids don't use drugs.
Andrew, that's a great point, man.
You don't know what's in it.
But you tell your kids don't use drugs. Like I tell my kids don't use drugs. I'm not going to tell them go to the store where you know what's in the drugs. I'm just saying don't use it at all.
People used to be like that about marijuana, too. They used to be like, don't smoke weed, it's terrible. Now it's legal. And
but I'm telling my kids don't use marijuana either.
Can we come back to your point, please?
Yes, go. I'm sorry.
The point you made was... what we don't know what's in these substances on the street. You're absolutely right. So the country says we're in an opioid crisis. One thing that is true, we certainly have had a number of overdoses. And one of the main reasons that people are overdosing is because they get tainted drug. They think that they may have something like heroin or oxycodone, when in fact they have fentanyl. Fentanyl is a lot more potent than heroin or oxycodone. That means that a smaller amount of that drug is enough in sometimes cases to kill you. And we can solve that problem just like they did in places like Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, Austria. They have these centers where you can submit small amounts of your drug, and you can have it tested and get a chemical printout of what's contained in your drug. And that way you know if some contaminant that's dangerous is in your drug, don't take it.
People were doing Molly, ecstasy, but that's a combination of different things. You don't really know what's in it.
Exactly, and that's one of the major dangers. And in this book, I am explaining how we can easily solve that problem if our officials actually gave a shit.
Well, how would we solve that problem?
We can have these centers where we test what's in your substance. Like you can submit as little as 10 milligrams and have it tested. And then you get a chemical printout and then you know what is in it and you know what it does. They do this in Spain, Austria, and all these other countries. We don't do it here because we're moralistic and judgmental about people seeking to have pleasure. That's why we don't do it here.
Have you ever tried anything else to deal with whatever trauma may exist in you? Because so many folks turn to drugs when they have pain. Have you tried any other methods?
Of course.
Okay.
I mean, I love comedy. I go see shows. There are a number of ways that we deal with unpleasant things in our lives.
Because I would never tell somebody to turn to drugs to deal with trauma.
Or even try.
Wait, hold
But
up.
what about ayahuasca?
Hold up.
People keep talking about...
I'm talking about heroin. I'm talking about crack. I'm talking about meth. I'm talking about cocaine. I ain't talking about ayahuasca and shrooms and weed and stuff like that.
We have to talk about why you ain't talking about that, because I have a chapter that deals with this exceptionalism, if you will, psychedelic exceptionalism. Psychedelics are okay. Everything else is not. We can talk about that. But first of all, to be clear, I am not telling anybody to do drugs. I don't have to. It's like drugs, people will seek out drugs. My job is to try and help people do this activity as safely as possible if you're going to do it. That's my job. So this notion that I'm somehow promoting drugs, the first sentence in my author's note is that this book is not promoting drugs. That's not what I do. Now, let's talk about this psychedelic exceptionalism. People, what you need to understand, in order for a drug to have an effect in our body, there are receptors in our brain, and it binds to these receptors. And if we have receptors in our brain, that means that we have natural chemicals in our brains that act like the drug. Now, when we start saying, oh, psilocybin or ayahuasca is different from heroin, it's just simply, obviously they produce different effects, but it's simply not true that one is more preferable to the next. The body doesn't see it like that. In fact,
even if one is plant-based and one isn't?
All of these things are plant-based. You know, you go to the opium poppy, what you have in it is morphine. And heroin is essentially the same drug as morphine with these two acid groups attached to it. But those acid groups don't have any biological effects, really.
But isn't heroin often more genetically modified?
No, you just make it by adding these two acid groups to it. That's it. It's from the opium poppy, and cocaine is from the coca leaf, of course. So all of these drugs have a plant basis, a natural sort of basis in our environment.
What about when people say you have an addictive personality? Is that a real thing? Because they feel like, you said a certain percentage of people will have issues with addiction and some people won't. But how do you know? You know what I mean? Like some people will be like, I don't want to try that. I know I have an addictive personality. Yeah,
so this notion of an addictive personality is myth. Now, it is true that some people will be more likely to become addicted than other people. And some of those things I tried to lay out earlier, if you have co-occurring psychiatric illnesses, depression, anxiety, trauma, all of these sorts of things increase the likelihood that you will become addicted.
And if your parents are addicts, does that increase the likelihood?
No, there's no real evidence that says like your genetics will determine whether you become addicted, although that's a popular sort of saying. And in science, we are still investigating it, but the evidence is very weak. But also consider this. Just think about, you guys are in the entertainment industry. Think about people who have these unrealistic expectations placed on them because they are supporting their families, their friends, they're supporting all of these people. And they have to perform night in, night out, and they have to do all of these kinds of things. Those sort of unrealistic expectations placed on them also increases the likelihood that these people, too, will become addicted. So
that's why you tell them go to therapy. Tell them take up meditation. Tell them go do yoga. I'm not going to tell them run and do heroin. Well, I guess for me, man, I've seen so many, bad examples of heroin users. You know what I mean? Crackheads. I've never seen any functioning heroin users are functioning, crack addicts.
And what are the good effects of heroin?
That you know of, I mean, you might not know.
What are the good effects of heroin? Like you always hear the bad effects of heroin. You hear liver and kidney disease. You see deteriorating the brain cells. You hear all these things. Like what's the good effects of heroin? Like what's something good about it?
Okay, so in 2015, I went to Switzerland and I worked in a heroin clinic where people who are actually heroin addicted, they received heroin twice a day, every day. Once in the morning, once in the evening. They came to the clinic and got their shots. And this has been going on for more than 20 years in Switzerland. When we think about what are the good things, most of those people are employed. All of them have housing. Most of them are happy. Their health improved because they no longer have to be out on the street looking for heroin. They have the social workers, psychologists, physicians, and they have no interest in stopping using their heroin. And they are productive members of their society. That's all good. That's what we want from people.
But what about on the body, though? You're saying that's good, but what about on the body? How does it affect the body?
Yeah, for example,
if you don't get that hit, if I don't drink this water, I'm not gonna go, sell my mother's VCR to make money to get the water.
Yeah,
but heroin, if it's addictive, I'm doing whatever it takes because I need that hit.
Yeah, so like that story that you're telling is like an extreme anecdote. Certainly, you can find that person, but that's
not where we from.
Hold up now. I'm from the hold up now. I'm from the hood. I started studying drugs because of the whole crack era. I believe crack was destroying my community, just like everybody else. That whole New Jack City thing. I believed all that sort of thing. But the problem is that I misattributed what was going on with those people. I thought it was the drug, for example, when in fact it was all these other things.
It's like socioeconomic conditions that lead to all of that.
Right on, exactly. So this is true. People do experience problems. But don't get it twisted. When most of the people who are using heroin, something like heroin, they're not going to tell you because of all of this negative judgment, of course. The ones who are functioning well, they're not going to say. So the only ones that you see are the ones who are contrite and they are repentant because they want your help. And they know that's the only story that you will accept about their heroin use. And then you're like, yeah, okay, now you found Jesus. Now come, let me help you. But if they come to you and say, nah, I'm good with my heroin. I need help with my finances. I need a better job. You're going to be like, get the fuck out of here. That's what you're going to. So they know the story that they need to tell is that, oh, I'm sorry. And so what I'm trying to do in the book is to show people that story is actually killing people, because people are less likely to seek help when they need it, and we are less likely to implement the programs that we need to help people.
Now, I'm glad you said that, because I agree with you when you say drugs should be legal. Whenever I see people get locked up for possession of crack or possession of heroin, cocaine, I'm like, don't send them to jail. Send them to rehab. Provide them with opportunities. Give them treatments. That's what I thought your stance was.
Yeah, because that's easy. That's easy. I mean, that's what.
But isn't that what's right?
Well, no, the liberals, that's incomplete, because, I mean, obviously I'm arguing that we should regulate all these drugs. That way we'll have quality control, we'll have better education, all of that. I'm arguing that. But if you argue that perspective, you have to understand that we have exaggerated the harmful effects of drugs. And in this book, I'm showing people how.
That's a tough line to say, Dr. Carl, that we've exaggerated the harmful effects of drugs.
Absolutely.
Have you seen what happens to crack addicted people, heroin addicted people? What happens to their families? What happens to the communities that exist with individuals like that? Like, that's kind of hard to say we're exaggerating.
Man, I grew up in Miami, cocaine capital, in the 70s, 80s, and so forth. And like I said, I started studying drugs because I wanted to solve the drug addiction problem. I have cousins and relatives, friends who got caught up in this, and I thought it was crack. In the book, I describe a story about New Jack City, about the writer, the guy who actually wrote it, meeting him. It's a white guy named Tom Wright from Idaho. And, when I was scheduled to meet him, I thought I was looking for somebody who looked like Teddy Riley or the Cash Money Brothers. But it was this white guy who looked like a lumberjack. And we sat down and talked about how that story came about. And, I really encourage people to read it so they can see how we've been all told this story. And we all say, oh, yeah, I saw that cat on the corner who was addicted with crack. And I remember all those cats making all that money from slanging. And it's like, I just think people misinterpreted what was going on. First of all, like, people were not making all kind of crazy loot. Most of the cats who...
They definitely were.
Hold up. Most of the cats who were on the corner were living at home with their moms. Most of the cats on the corner had no car.
I know individuals who lived at home with their mom but still had $100,000 under the mattress.
Well, you might have known one. You may have known one or two, but I was in the game for a little bit and I knew a lot. And I know we talk about Ricky Ross.
Were you using in the game as well?
No. I was too dumb. No, I was too dumb. I believe.
What you mean by that? You was too dumb.
I believe the hype. I did all this sort of stuff, and I now have a lot more knowledge, and I know what's real versus what's not real. But the point is that we tell everybody that bullshit story about crack, and that story is imprisoning us. It prevents us from looking at deeper what was going on.
What bullshit story about crack?
Oh, crack destroyed the community. And that's it. Hold up, let me explain.
Okay.
Unemployment, that's a concern. Highest rates of unemployment, for example, were in 1982. Crack didn't appear until late 1985 in most places in the country. Murder. We talk about murder rates. We had a peak spike in murder in 1980. Again, crack didn't appear until 1985. And then we had another spike in 91. And sure, it might have had something to do with the crack sort of markets being developed, but not the pharmacological effects of the drug like we tell people. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying that we just need to reevaluate. But it's developed. The story is developed more in the book. So I really encourage people to read the book. They will get salvation. I promise.
What about because you said that you called the war on drugs an American jobs program. What do you mean by that? You said that in the book.
Yeah. The war on drugs is a jobs program. One of the things that happened, as I pointed out, jobs left from the Rust Belt, like Illinois, Ohio, Michigan, and you had to replace those jobs. And we replaced them largely with law enforcement jobs that largely benefit less well-educated white guys. And this here sort of jobs program is predicated on incarcerating black and brown bodies.
Absolutely.
And that's what I mean. And I show people how this goes down.
So when you know that, right, and you talk about the war on drugs and the impact of, crack on the community, when you see a black man go to jail for 15, 20 years for a 20 of rock, like why would you encourage that kind of behavior?
What behavior? And what behavior am I encouraging? I'm not
because even if the person is, that's why I said I agree with you when you say that the drugs should be legal for that reason.
Yeah.
Because I don't want the person to go to jail for 20 years for a 20-year rock. Now, if you're saying that, I can agree with that.
Oh, of course. That's what I say in the book. But all I'm saying is that the story is even more complicated than that. We have wrongly vilified the drugs themselves and not what is really going on in American society. And the same old things that have always been going on. Good old American racism is really at the heart of a lot of this sort of stuff.
Well, Talk to me.
There is a reason. Mm-hmm. There is a reason that we have vilified crack and the users who use crack.
It's
but they make
usually
it
black
seem
and
like
brown
cocaine
people.
is glamorous.
Right. There is a reason. There is a reason because of race and those sorts of things. There is a reason that we are asking people to be more compassionate towards the poor person who used opioids and they got addicted because of their doctor. Because the face or the image of that person typically is a white person.
What I'm confused about is you talk about you haven't used heroin in over a year and a half.
Yes.
Right? Of course, the news made it seem like you use it every day. So what gets you to the point where you have to use heroin? Like, is it socially? Is it something going on in your life? Is it just hanging out with the boys?
You made it sound like smoking a cigarette. You was like, I sit by the fire. You said I sit by the fireplace and there's nothing better than doing a line.
Yeah, so what makes you do
Dr.
that?
Hart, you've also talked about the withdrawal that you have to go through from that too, which is not easy.
Right. So I'll answer this question. So one of the things that happens with heroin, as well as some other drugs, think of antidepressants in the same way. If you take heroin consecutively for weeks or months and then you abruptly discontinue, your body has grown accustomed to the drug being in it. And so as a result, when you abruptly discontinue it, you get withdrawal effects. And these withdrawal effects can be unpleasant. The same is true that happens when you take antidepressants for a similar amount of time. You can have withdrawal symptoms. That's absolutely true. With alcohol, however, when you do this with alcohol, you might die. But whereas with heroin, you can't really die from heroin withdrawal. But with alcohol withdrawal, you can die. And I point this out in the book so people can understand when we start talking about hard, good, bad drugs, this distinction makes no sense.
Don't you think if you're going through withdrawal?
He didn't answer the question. So what got you to the point where you have to use heroin if you don't use it every day? Like, what is that? Is it just socially?
Thank
is
you.
it chilling? Is it recreation?
No.
Is it...
So I study drugs, right? And so I want to know everything about every aspect of what I study.
So you used every drug before to study it?
Damn near everyone. I have certainly everyone that you probably have heard of.
Crack, coke, heroin.
Well, I don't
opioids.
I don't particularly like smoking drugs. I work out every day, so I like to make sure my lungs are good, and so I don't.
So you inject?
No, I never inject. I mean, I'm vain too. I don't want people looking at my.
If you don't smoke and you don't inject, how's?
Oh, you take it orally. You can sniff.
I don't know. I'm not.
Yeah, exactly. So, I wanted to know about every aspect of what I do, and part of that is to actually know something about the effects. Like if I would have just kind of believed the narrative, I would have believed that heroin was the most addictive thing that one could do, and one hit or two hits, you're addicted. It's just simply not true.
But it does affect everybody differently, you would say.
Well, this is why I was pointing out about people who have co-occurring illnesses, people who have these unrealistic expectations placed on them. A wide range of things. I try to explain this in the book. Those sort of things certainly can impact the likelihood of you becoming addicted, and also impact the likelihood of you experiencing some negative effects.
You know, this is interesting to me because in the music business, I've worked with people who definitely use recreational drugs, and they're not like, I never looked at them as addicts. And then also going to school, but they didn't use them it wasn't like they needed it.
Most of these guys in the rap game are drug addicts and don't know it.
To work and do certain things, and they would talk about it in their music. And then I also went to school where people did recreationally use drugs, but still excelled in life from that. So it is interesting to me. I've never been the type of person, I've tried things. Obviously, I always say I enjoy shrooms, but I've had bad experiences too where I'm not really into it like that, but I've never felt like I was addicted when I tried something a couple of times. So,
you're like most of us. Most people who use drugs have that experience, because you say mushroom, psilocybin is certainly a drug, and it was vilified in the 1960s and 70s, but now it's enjoying this resurgence of popularity, and it's okay for middle class people to come out about their mushrooms use today. But in the 1970s, that would have been frowned upon.
It's legal in some places now. Right?
No, it's not legal. I want to say something about Oregon, which is a predominantly white state. They have decriminalized all drugs. So that means that if you're using or possessing drugs, you won't go to jail. Why hasn't that happened in states that have greater racial diversity? I'll tell you why. Because it's too important to have these drug laws in those places for probable cause for police. So it's like, oh, I smell weed, or now I can mess with you. And so it's important for us to watch and see where drug policy becomes more liberalized and where it does not.
I agree with you, and that's why I think the conversation should be about legalizing those drugs and getting people help, as opposed to telling people it's okay to do drugs. It just seems weird to be telling people just say yes, especially when it comes to whiteness, right? Because we often think that we can get away with what white people. We want to get away with what white people get away with, but oftentimes those things are just wrong.
Well, bro, I'm glad you said that. You said so much there. Let's unpack it. So first of all, I'm not telling anybody to do any drugs. That's not what I do. In fact, I'm just trying to help people who are already doing this be more safe. That's one. Two, I'm kind of troubled by the assumption that somehow black folks are not smart enough to handle or are strong enough to handle what white people can handle. So we say, well, that might be fine for white folks, but black people, they can't do this. I'm troubled by that because...
No, I'm just saying if something is wrong, it's wrong. Like if we're saying heroin use is wrong, crack addiction is wrong, then it's wrong. It don't matter who's doing it. I don't want to do something wrong just because they can get away with it.
Why is heroin use wrong? Let's just think about in all of these countries that use heroin in medicine, and these people who are doing heroin, they're fine. They're contributing to their communities. They're upstanding citizens.
But if you're getting to the point where you're going through withdrawals, you've probably done too much. You're probably abusing it.
So somebody who has been on an antidepressant and then they abruptly discontinue, and now they have withdrawal, we're saying what you were doing by taking that, you're wrong.
No, you can abuse antidepressants as well. That's a proven fact.
But you've been taking it to feel better, and then you abruptly...
But you can still abuse it.
Yes. Certainly you can abuse it, but you're saying it's wrong. I mean, this is not inherently wrong. These are just inert substances. We as humans place all this morality and judgment on this, and that's part of the problem. Like, why would I come to you if I use heroin and say, yo, Charlamagne, man, I'm having some problems here, and then I know you're going to be a judgmental dude. Why would
I'm not going to judge you. I'm going to be like,
you just said it's wrong.
Well, let me ask you this. How do you determine whether or not you have the capability to use hard drugs without becoming addicted? Because I haven't seen it. I'm sorry, brother.
Yeah, thank you. In the book, it's called Drug Use for Grown-Ups, and I explain what a grown-up is. People who are responsible, they handle their responsibilities, they look after their children, they look after their health, they look after their sleep patterns, all of this sort of stuff. That's who might be okay engaging in this activity. If someone is irresponsible in other aspects of their life, yeah, you can probably predict that they're going to be irresponsible in terms of their drug use as well.
So what makes you a drug addict?
Most people don't know they're irresponsible until it's too late, though.
I'm sorry, bro.
Most people don't know they're irresponsible until it's too late. And my fear is like somebody hearing this or reading your book and think it's okay. Well, it's okay. The doctor said it's okay to use drugs every once in a while. He said it's not bad for me to use drugs. It's just as bad as having, I can die the same way from having an orgasm. That's my fear when kids hear that or people hear that.
Wait, did I say what you just said?
That's what it felt like.
No,
That's what it sounded like.
I didn't say that.
I just want to know what your message is, just clear and plain.
Yeah.
What are you trying to get across in drug use for grown-ups?
Yeah, what I'm trying to get across, man, I'm trying to tell people, for example, people who are using opioids, I'm trying to say, the risk is really increased when you use street drugs and not, you don't know what's in it. See if you can get it tested. It's important to know what's in your substance. That's what I'm saying to the users.
So you're not saying don't use it. You're saying just make sure you know what you are using.
Absolutely, because when you say don't do this, people they stop listening to the people who are doing it. And I'm saying to government officials, if you really cared about your population, you would have these drug checking facilities where people can submit small samples of their drugs and have them tested for purity, and then we will know if it contains any contaminants. I'm saying to government officials, if you really cared about your citizens, you would have public service announcements saying, if you're going to use opioids, don't mix with these other sedatives because it becomes potentially more dangerous. And I'm saying to American citizens, if you know anything about what it means to be an American, this life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness that we're guaranteed, the original promise of the country, if you knew anything about being an American, then you would really look at and question what we're doing with our drug policies because it's inconsistent with that promise.
Yeah, I don't think I disagree with any of that, but I want to know why not just spend the money and resources on helping people get clean and providing better opportunities for people. And if people are dealing with some type of real trauma, giving them other methods instead of drug use. Because 9 times out of 10, when people are on drugs, it's not for recreation. They're doing it because they're going through some type of trauma.
And what he said, you can't go to CVS to go buy your heroin. You can't say, okay, let me go get some Welch's fruit snacks and let me get a side of heroin. You can't buy it. So you're telling people to test it. They're getting it from dealers because you can't buy it.
That's right. That's right. So if you're going to get it from dealers and so forth, make sure you can find some way to get it tested. That's right. That's what I'm telling people. And back to your point, because I think this is a really important point. You have to understand that no matter what you say or what I say, people are going to engage in drug using activity, whether I like it or not.
Very true.
Right. So whether I like it or not. So what I'm trying to do is enhance the safety of this activity without judgment. If that's what you're into, that's fine. It's like saying, I'm telling you, it's like saying, we don't like who you're having sex with. They're going to do it anyway.
Right.
And so that's cool. How can we enhance the safety of that activity? That's my job.
But do you agree with getting people clean at all?
If they want it, absolutely.
Okay.
If adults want it, I spent 25 years trying to develop medications to help people get clean for that reason. That's exactly right. I'm sorry.
That's okay. So, Dr. Hart, let me ask you this. So, like you said, people who want to use drugs will find a way to use them. The best thing you can do is keep them safe. But at what point, let's say you have these check-in facilities and people are coming too much, right, throughout the day. Say they're coming 10 times a day instead of, once every 3 days. Is there something you think should be in place for that where it's some type of mandatory help ever?
I think at these drug checking facilities, we should have information, educational information about treatment, so people have that information. But in terms of them coming multiple times a day, that's fine, because if they're there, that means that they're not somewhere else, and we get eyes on them, and we can see that they are still with us and they're okay.
What if it's fentanyl in it, right, and that you find that out? Then do you try to find the person that sold them the tainted drugs and have some type of charges for that.
No, that's a great point. So absolutely, you can figure out this, right? If fentanyl is being put into the supply and passed off as something like heroin, then we can go after unscrupulous people who are doing this. You know, like in a place like Spain, one of the things that they see is that their drug supply is a lot more pure when you have drug checking in the region, because dealers know that the drugs are going to be tested, and they know that if they have contaminants in their drugs, they're going to be out-competed. And so they have to make sure their product is clean.
So you think they should go after the dealers in situations like that?
I don't think that they should go after them for arrest, but I think they should be they should be let known that it should be let known that we know that you are tainting the supply, and give them warnings and let people know to avoid those dealers.
Let me ask you a question. At what point do you know you have a problem?
At what point do you know?
How many times is too many times?
No, thank you, man, because we haven't talked about that. We just talked about the term addiction, so that's a great point. So when I'm talking about the term addiction, I'm really talking about the American Psychiatric Association sort of definition, and that is when people have psychosocial disruptions in their functioning. That is, they are failing to meet these major obligations, like they don't come to work, they don't go to school, they're not engaging in family sort of functions or events that are important. They're failing all of these sort of obligations, and the person themselves are disturbed about not meeting these obligations. Because you can imagine, for example, like you failed to meet Thanksgiving dinner this year, and you failed to meet Christmas dinner with your family, and then you say, well, you were using cocaine or heroin, and so you might have a problem. It's like, no, my family are Trump supporters, so I ain't going. And so that's not necessarily a problem if the person doesn't think it's a problem. And so usually we want people to recognize the problem themselves.
That's what they say, you're addicted to porn if you miss work or you're missing appointments because you're at home watching porn. They said that's the level to when you know you're addicted.
Oh, duh.
Yeah.
Y'all comparing a lot of stuff to heroin and crack that is really some false equivalency, by the way.
I agree.
Wait, tell me why, man, because I think that's an important
I could do
point.
heroin once today for the first time ever. You got me? I could do something today, right? And literally blow off my family for the day. Right? I could blow off my daughter's cheerleading.
No, I don't think
my wife might have an appointment. I may not go. That one time I blew off my family's appointment. So does that mean I'm irresponsible? Does that mean I have a problem?
No. I mean, you are so successful, all of you all, that the likelihood of that happening, I'll actually stake my life on it.
But what if it does, though?
Hold on, man. I'm just saying the likelihood of that happening is so low. I mean, you're ascribing these magical properties to heroin that just don't exist.
What if I do it once and die?
What if you do it once and die? Well, if you do that, because that's certainly a possibility, right? That's certainly...
Especially because you don't know what's in it, and there's nowhere to test it.
Right, and you don't know what you're doing. And I don't think you will do that because you have demonstrated all of this responsibility in your life.
What you mean, I wouldn't do the drug?
No, I mean, you wouldn't do the drug without being knowledgeable about it, without knowing everything you're doing.
I wouldn't do the drug.
Exactly. I mean, you would...
But that's the point of saying just say no.
That's fine. If that works for you, that's great, man. That's absolutely fine.
I guess I just want to know what makes you an addict.
I think the first time you use a drug is that you have a problem. Like that's what I honestly.
If you do heroin,
I think
it could be experimental. No,
I've used drugs like once or twice, and I don't feel like I had a problem. I did like 10
You did heroin?
years ago.
You did heroin once or twice?
I think there's heroin and ecstasy. You don't know what's in it.
No, well, I hope you didn't have heroin in your ecstasy.
I mean, I don't know what's in ecstasy, honestly.
Yeah,
when
no,
I did
that's
it,
right.
I didn't know what was in it. It could have been. Who knows?
Yeah, it could have been, but I hope not.
There's no heroin in ecstasy,
But
right?
I did feel like that was a dangerous thing to do, you know, in retrospect. And fortunately, I didn't do it again because... I don't know.
Why'd you do it the
you know
first
what
time?
What made me decide not to do it? I saw this HBO special, A Family on Ecstasy.
What made you do it the first time?
I just tried it.
Can I help
not?
you?
I mean,
so if we think about ecstasy, MDMA, it's an excellent drug for some people to enhance connections with their loved ones, to enhance empathy, openness. I mean, all of those things you want in your relationship with the person with whom you are in love. And so that's an understandable thing. How can you enhance this relationship? Nothing's wrong with that. People drink alcohol to facilitate social interactions. We don't frown on that. So the question is, why are we frowning on these other things?
I'm not frowning on the drugs. I'm frowning on what the effects of the drugs.
Like you talk about Adderall, right?
Yes, I talk about Adderall.
Mm-hmm. So talk about the correlation with Adderall, caffeine, and how they prescribe Adderall really quickly to people. And people also take that recreationally.
Yeah, so I did a study comparing Adderall with methamphetamine. When you look at the chemical structures of these two drugs,
it's the same drug.
Essentially the same drug. Mm-hmm. And when we did the study on double-blind conditions, what we found is that the drug produced nearly identical effects. They are the same drug. Other people have found the same thing. But yet the narratives around Adderall versus methamphetamine, they wildly differ. And I'm saying that this is consistent with the narrative with heroin and morphine, with ketamine and PCP. All of these sorts of things, the narrative wildly different, but the data, the evidence is not different. But our narratives differ.
Why is one legal and one isn't?
Methamphetamine is legal. Mm-hmm. It's a Schedule II drug. You can prescribe it for ADHD and obesity. Mm-hmm. But most Americans don't know that because of these narratives that pop up around methamphetamine.
And it's probably legal because of the fact that white people abuse them often. Because if that was the black community, they'd be treating it like crack, I think.
Well, I agree. We think about why cocaine is banned.
Glamorous.
Cocaine is banned because of the association in the early 1900s with black men, and they said that they were raping white women and they were unaffected by 32 caliber bullets. And so all of these stories, of course, were not true, but they banned cocaine along with opioids because of their racism toward Chinese. They banned these drugs because of American racism, not because of what the drugs actually did.
Now
and
you're
they
married,
want Chinese
right?
people and
Yes.
white people hanging together in opium dens.
That's exactly it. Yeah,
You're married.
Yeah, you read the book.
Mm-hmm.
If you sleep with another woman every now and then, but you still have a functioning, happy marriage, is that cheating?
Oh my God! I don't know. It depends on the person because some people are in open relationships.
What if you're not? What if your wife knows nothing about it, but you keep everything solid at home, happy, functioning marriage, but every now and then you sleep with another woman? You consider that cheating?
It is cheating.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The secrecy of it.
Now you are married. Does your family indulge in that as well when you test it, or no?
No, I can't put my family on blast. This is the arrows come at me,
Mm-hmm.
and so that's not,
No,
really.
the reason I ask is because if I was using drugs, I'm sure my wife would probably have a problem with it, even if I tried it once or twice, because the fear that I could possibly be addictive. So I'm just asking, is your wife approving of it, or does she understand, or
Oh, my wife completely supports me. Remember, too, I got 30 years of experience in doing this kind of thing. This is not like some cat off the street. I ain't new to this. You know what I'm saying? So this ain't a big deal. This is just like you doing your radio show and talking about your show to somebody else who doesn't do this kind of thing. I mean, if I want to know something about broadcasting and how to be popular, I'm coming to you all. You all know this. I don't know this. This ain't my area.
What about you said you've been using heroin for the past 5 years, is what I read.
Yeah.
So when did you first start? When did you first ever take a hit of heroin, and why?
It might have been now maybe 2015. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I wanted to know every aspect about what I do. And it was pharmaceutical grade, not in this country, in a country where drugs are decriminalized.
So you did it strictly for research purposes?
Yeah, because I wanted to know.
How did it make you feel when you first took that first hit?
Just like I had taken something like Percocet, oxycodone. It was nice and euphoric, pleasant, chilled. Anxiety melts away.
You wasn't scared? You wasn't nervous? You wasn't think I might die?
So I know what I'm doing, one, and I know it's pure, and I know not to take a large dose. And so it's not a difficult proposition. Oftentimes, like right now, we are all encouraged to get the COVID vaccine, and we all will. But, the people who are getting the vaccine know a lot less about that than I know about heroin. Mm-hmm. So, so it's more risky for me to take the vaccine than it is for me to take heroin that I know the purity and I know the dose. That's not a risky proposition for me.
The problem is the average person doesn't have that knowledge, right?
You're absolutely right.
So that's what the real problem is that you can do these things safely because you've studied it for 30 years. You know it's pure. You know where you're getting it from. You know how much to take. The average person doesn't know that.
He's coming from, but you're coming from a place. Right. You're coming from a place of privilege because there's plenty of people in poor and disenfranchised areas who can do heroin or any of these drugs, and they will get addicted. They're not doing it for research. They don't have the luxury of doing it for research purposes. They're truly trying to escape something.
See, that's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book so I could share, as you point out, my privilege with other people, my knowledge with other people. I wrote the book to try to help keep those people safe who will do this anyway. You're absolutely right.
And you might not like this equivalency, but I look at it like this, how we always talk about, like, people will say music is harmful to people because they talk about doing this and doing that. Now people are going to try it. But this doesn't make me want to try heroin. But you know what I mean? I don't think anybody listening that would never want to do that would be like, I'm about to go try some heroin.
Right.
But there's people that are doing it that are like, oh man, I'm doing it. Let me do it safely.
That's right. That's all I want. That's why I wrote the book, and to try and help keep Americans safe, to try and help keep people safe for whom I care about.
Have you ever had a bad experience when you took anything, tried something?
I'm sure. Well, I'll tell you.
You had withdrawals. So
yeah. So there was a time when I wanted to know what opioid withdrawal was like. So I took some opioids for consecutive weeks and abruptly discontinued, and I had withdrawal. I planned it like so it would happen the night before a big talk, so I could say that this is no big deal.
So you were able to quit cold turkey?
Yeah, I did.
You know that's not everybody's story either, though.
There are people who use a lot more than I did in this little experiment, and they would have a lot more difficult time. You're absolutely right. The withdrawal would have been a lot worse, but I wasn't trying to have the worst withdrawal I could have. All I wanted to do was experience it, and so I could see what it was like for myself.
What was that experience?
What it was like. The worst of that experience was the abdominal pain. It felt like it was stabbing that radiated throughout my body. And I have no interest in going through opioid withdrawal again. I won't ever do that again.
You know, we did this when we did this detox,
that's a luxury,
right?
Though.
Me and Envy did this detox, and for 2 weeks we couldn't eat anything. Only thing we could have was like water. And one of my friends who did the detox, she had like a withdrawal, but it wasn't. I don't know. It's not like she was using drugs. I don't know what it was from, but it was really bad. It was like that, like stomach pains, chills, shivering, throwing up, and everything.
She probably was taking a medication that you didn't know about, and probably didn't consult her physician before starting this detox, and that's probably not the smartest thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
How does our environment influence drug usage or lack thereof?
Our environment influences drug use quite a bit. You can think about in a place where marijuana is illegal, and people smoke, young people, and somebody knocks at the door, and then they think that it's the postman, but they see a uniform, and then they think it's the police. That can trigger some paranoia that looks like schizophrenia in some people. That's an environmental sort of effect. So the paranoia surrounding drug use in this society is important, and it can be really harmful. So the environment is one of the most important things when we think about where drugs are taken and their effects. And so that's why it's important for people to take, if they're going to do this, to take drugs in a comfortable, safe environment.
Do you enjoy drugs, Dr. Carhart? Do you enjoy drugs?
Some drugs I do, that's otherwise, why would I engage in an activity that I don't enjoy?
How does the university feel about this? Obviously, you are an expert and you've done this for 30 years, but now there's all this attention around it. So what are they saying about it? I'm just curious.
I don't know, but, like the attention that I have gotten has been inaccurate, and they've just been lies. So if anybody reads my book, they'll know that it's nonsense, and there wouldn't be any sort of reason for the university to be concerned.
So they haven't contacted you and been like, what's going on here, just because it has gotten a lot of attention?
Yeah, you have have to understand too, they check my record and they know that I have more than 100 scientific publications in this area. They know that I have multiple books. They know that I'm one of the most responsible professors they have. They know all of the work that I've done. And so like the things that are being said in the press, you don't get to be like me if you are doing that activity that they said I was doing in the press.
Well, let's bring this home. I agree on the fact that drugs should be legal. I don't think people should be going to jail when they have an actual problem. You know, I agree with that. But as far as like just encouraging people to do it recreationally just because they're going to do it anyway, I'd rather personally get them some treatment. Personally, I'd rather get them some help.
I think he was saying that if people who are using it to be responsible, but he does say
and that's
not
why I say I would rather get those people some treatment as opposed to encouraging them to just, creating safe spaces for them to do it.
Yeah, I agree.
I'd rather get them some help.
Charlamagne, you ain't going to get an argument from me when you're talking about treatment, man. I mean, I'm with you. But that ain't what I'm saying. I'm not saying, yo, you should go out and do this. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there are people doing this. And how can I, as a responsible professional, help enhance the safety?
Absolutely,
that's it.
And I'm saying I would rather get those same people some help. I'd rather get them clean and provide them opportunity as opposed to providing a safe space for them to continue to do drugs. Well,
I have tried that too, and I mean with relatives and friends, and they basically said like, "Get the fuck out of here, you pedantic asshole," and so now I can't, they don't even talk to me, so there's no way I can even help because they're gonna, as adults, people will do what they're going to do. And so I've learned as a parent, my number one goal is to get my kids home, right? And so they will do their thing, and I have to figure out how to help them do their thing as safely as possible and how to make sure they are good people. That's my goal as a parent.
If in 10 years we see you, 5 years, 10 years, and you're strung out and you got a problem and you had to check into rehab and you're trying to get clean, can we burn all your books?
Yeah, please do that. But I'm 54 years old, man. I challenge you to find somebody my age in as good a shape and as productive. It's like the shit is crazy.
Most people are not like that. People all have families that have crackheads or
crackheads don't die, by the way,
and things like that affects everybody's family. Me personally, I think the message is don't use drugs. Stay away from drugs. Test the drugs that you're using to see what
wait, hold up. Understand people are doing drugs, and my job is not a moralist, and I'm not gonna sit here and be like, don't do that. That's wrong. That's what's wrong with this country today.
We've been saying that for decades.
When we're
telling
adults how to behave, when the original promise of the country is that you can live your life like you see fit as long as you don't bother other people. That's the original promise. That's what it means to be an American.
But a lot of times it bothers other people, especially if people
Now that's a different question. If you're bothering other people and you're disrupting their ability to enjoy that original promise, then we got a problem.
The original promise is bullshit, though.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. Because think about who wrote the original promise. How can that original promise ever have been true when we were in bondage when that original promise was written?
No, that's right. Thomas Jefferson wrote the original promise. Now, Thomas Jefferson probably...
Liberty and justice for all is bullshit, especially when people were enslaved.
Hold up. Jefferson wrote the original promise, and he probably plagiarized it from John Locke. But that's okay. The point is, Jefferson was a horrible individual in many respects. But that doesn't mean that this promise is a horrible promise. That promise is what propelled people like Martin Luther King and all the rest of my heroes to move forward, to fight for justice in this country, to fight for liberty in this country. That promise is what was driving those people who I hold in high esteem.
I agree, but we have to know that we were not in mind when they kept those promises, because in that same Constitution, we were labeled 3/5 of a human.
Trust me, I know that, and there's a critique of that in the book, but that does not negate the promise.
We want them to uphold the promise.
Absolutely,
yeah.
And that's what I'm fighting for people to uphold the promise, because when they don't, my people suffer.
All right. Well, Dr. Hart, we appreciate you for joining us this morning. Tell them the title of your book one more time, please.
Drug Use for Grown-Ups, Chasing Liberty in the Land of Fear.
It was a great conversation.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
I have no problem exchanging ideas, even if we don't agree on everything.
I really appreciate it. You don't know how much it means to me.
But don't you overdose, because I swear to God, if you overdose, I'm going to give you the greatest donkey of the day I have ever written in my life. I promise you, okay?
Yo, that's a bet.
My man.
Yeah.
All right. Dr. Carl Hart, it's the Breakfast Club. Good morning.